everyone. Welcome to Autumn is Here. I am your host, Francine Crawford, and today we have an amazing show. We're going to talk about some much needed information. We're going to talk about estate planning, and today we have Miss Nicole Donnelly. So let's welcome her to the show. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Francine. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on and giving us some time. This is something that a lot of people need to know more about. A lot of people don't understand how to plan for, when you get older. So please tell me a little bit about yourself before we get started.
So again, my name is Nicole Donnelly. I'm an estate planning attorney. I've been doing it for 6 years. And really, I have to say what has catapulted me into this space is the lack of knowledge, right? I'm Colombian, I'm Irish, I speak Spanish fluently, and I work in the community oftentimes. And I find nobody knows a lot of the things that are just very basic to other people. And I feel like I'm starting anew with, just basic documents, healthcare proxies, power of attorneys. A will has to go through court. You can qualify for Medicaid just if you own a home, if your income isn't astronomically high. And, most New Yorkers, their income isn't high. And it really falls down to the specifics of your facts and your lifestyle and what you have. And you can't listen to your neighbor or your best friend or your cousin, right? Yeah. So I've just found myself to be an incredible resource for information and knowledge. And I really love to serve the community because I feel like that's what I was put on this planet to do.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very good. I'm glad that you're interested in helping people, and you realize that there's a need for that because there's a lot of people who don't know. So how would someone start off? What would you suggest? Like, is there a age that you should start off doing this and planning?
So I tell everybody's first step, once you hit 18, like a lot of people have their college kids, right? Kids are going off to college. It's their first time out of the house. Parents are letting them go. You're a little bit indecisive on how to do it. Those kids need a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney. God forbid they're in the hospital, away at college. You can't just call up and say, hey, I need to know what's going on with my kid. They're still your kid. At 17, you would have been able to do that. At 18, you can't.
Right.
So once you turn 18, you need a healthcare proxy power of attorney if you're going to manage anybody's affairs. Now, fast forward to when you become a caretaker child, right? Your parents are 70. They have these assets. They're claiming their RMDs. They have everything going on. And you start noticing maybe they're forgetting some things. Maybe some things aren't going the way they used to. Maybe they've slowed down a little bit, right? Now is the time. Now is definitely the time to start planning. You get a healthcare proxy, you get a power of attorney, you get a will done, right? If they have assets and you want to start preserving them for long-term care in New York, there's really only 2 routes to go. If you project that your parent or yourself may need long-term care, you either put into a long-term care insurance, right, that you've been paying for a really long time that's going to cover some type of home care or nursing home, or you need Medicaid. Okay. That's really the only 2 ways you're going to get it in New York, or you're going to private pay, right? There is a third way, but it's going to cost, and it's going to cost a lot, right? We see nursing home bills at $19,000 a month right now. And so nobody wants that, but sometimes it's avoidable. It's not avoidable, right? Like you can't avoid it. So what do? We put our assets in trust. We start planning. We look at individuals' incomes, what's coming in, and we start telling you how to kind of manage and how to go about it so that the whole family can kind of build generational wealth. Because if you ask most people why they invested in their home, multiple homes, why they haven't spent $1, why they don't go on vacation every year, it's not because they wanted to deprive themselves. It's usually because they wanted to save for the next generation.
Right. So it's interesting, and I kind of want to break it down a little bit. Just for example, if some people don't understand certain things, people believe that if you don't have a house, or you may not have any assets. You know what I mean? People get confused, like, oh, well, I don't have a house, I don't have any assets, or I don't have anything of, real value. Can you just explain a little bit about what other things are assets other than a house?
Absolutely. So anything retirement, 401k, IRA, pensions, those base principles are protected. Those are not considered assets that would work against you if you needed any type of long-term care. The income distribution is a separate matter, but the principle is protected. You can collect any type of benefits from Medicaid if you need them, home attendant or nursing home, right? Now, as far as, let's say, a savings, a CD, mutual funds, brokerage accounts, things of that nature, people think, oh, I'm have beneficiaries on that, I'm fine. Beneficiaries only take effect if you pass away. It's not protecting the asset. It's not giving you any type of security or any type of advantage if you were to need long-term care. That asset is at play. You're going to go to apply and say, I have a savings with just 200,000, even 180,000, right? Something that you worked hard to save and put to the side and it's meaningful to you. Some people say, well, I don't have that much. Anything that you have is a lot because you put effort into getting that, right? Nobody gave it to you. It didn't just pop up. It's valuable. That's your life's work, whatever it is. You can protect that and it can avoid any type of probate that a lot of people are afraid of while also protecting the asset if you ever needed long-term care through Medicaid.
Okay. So everybody's always talking about getting a trust.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain exactly what a trust is?
Yes. A trust is a vehicle by which people legally protect their assets from what, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people think they're protecting their assets, but they don't really know what they're protecting from.
Right, exactly.
A lot of people say the government. The government is not a mystical creature that just comes on in and is interested in you, right? But what they really mean to say is court intervention, because when you allow the court into your affairs, you're allowing the government, because what is the court? It's a government-run entity, right?
Yeah.
So what happens? So if you're protecting against probate, that means you don't want your heirs in court. So yeah, you can do that by just putting beneficiaries on your accounts, right? I wouldn't recommend it. We have a transfer on death deed for property that doesn't always work because it says the heirs are taking contingent to any liens or creditors that you may have. So we don't really know how that's going to work because that's only came out in 2021 in New York. So there hasn't been much law around it yet. So I don't really recommend that if you have a bunch of kids, a bunch of contingencies. If something happens to your kids, it's supposed to go to your grandkids, right?
And you really don't recommend, what is it again?
A transfer on death deed.
Okay.
Not for families, right? But all in all, you can protect your assets by using a trust from probate. Now, there's different types of trust, right? There's a revocable trust, one where you maintain full control and the assets maintain under your social security number. That's fully revocable. You can change it at any time. You're in charge, nothing to do. The irrevocable can also be changed, but you're not necessarily in charge on paper. I like to tell people it's like building a little bit of a family company, right? You're the owner of the company, and like all good owners and bosses, they have managers, right? If your managers are good, you just tell them what to do and they do it, right? Same way as a company, you can fire your managers. You can also disinherit the people that you've chosen to put into your trust. So you're not locked in. So if anybody tells you an irrevocable trust is that's it, you're signing your life away, I don't like to tell people that because that's just not true. There is a type of irrevocable trust that does that. That's not the one that I'm talking about. And that's important because a lot of people get locked into an irrevocable trust and then they have zero powers at the end, and that's just not good. So an irrevocable trust can be changed. You just got to make sure you're getting the one that legally can be changed, because otherwise you're signing technically all of your assets into something that you no longer have a control over. And it's almost like a completed gift. Once you give a gift, you can't really take it back.
Okay.
But like I said, those are the two different types of trust. And that's really how you execute your plan, right? That's why everybody's talking about it. But they're missing out on the big important factors here. A trust only works when you pass away. It doesn't, and it does protect the assets when you get sick, the irrevocable, not the revocable. However, it doesn't give people immediate access to help you. So like if you're sick in a hospital, they're not going to wave around the trust and tell the doctor, I'm a trustee of the trust.
Oh, so you can't take anything out. You can't use any of the money or anything even to help the person.
You don't want to take the money out for medical expenses. The point is to already be protected and shielded to where you don't need to dip into that money for medical expenses.
Okay.
But everything, listen, there's a lot of ways around everything, right? We just need to have a legal baseline and do everything legally. So for that, I would always say consult the lawyer.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's talk about the things that people have heard about and how powerful it is to use these things like power of attorney or a living will or a healthcare proxy. Let's talk about a couple of those things.
A lot of people say, oh, my parents don't have anything. They don't need anything. I find a lot of those
Mm.
people calling me years later saying, my dad had one account and he was logging onto his account, but he kept forgetting his PIN number. So the bank locked him out. And now I'm
Um,
trying to speak to them and they won't speak to me because I'm not power of attorney. He really only has this one account and that's where his social security goes into. And I can't do anything to unlock it. And I'm going, because you're not power of attorney.
mhm.
And if dad can't sign a power of attorney right now to give her the ability to do that, we're kind of stuck, right?
Mm.
So just because your parents have nothing, your parents are something,
Mhm.
right? And their affairs, something happens to all of us. Just because we age doesn't mean the world stops.
Right,
And
right.
any
Thank you.
little thing can happen. I've
Yeah.
seen people already on Medicaid, fully qualified, receiving benefits, home attendants. Their kids hate the home attendant. They're like, I don't like her. I want to fire her. And obviously, you're not going to send your 82-year-old mom in to fire their own home
Right.
attendant. So you want to step in. Well, Medicaid will say, you're not a power of attorney. We won't
Wow.
speak to you and you can't fire this person.
Good point.
And unless mom wants to fire them, we're not taking your word. So are you going to drag your mom in, put her on the phone, make her talk to Medicaid and explain why this lady maybe is not for her?
Yeah.
Maybe she doesn't even know that the lady's not for her and
Right,
not doing the
right.
right thing, right? She just sees she's nice and what's wrong with her?
Right, right.
But you have standards that you want
Mhm.
upheld for your parents.
Mhm.
So you want to always be able to put yourself in a position where you can uphold those standards that they would want if they were, good and ready.
So you can represent them. You can make decisions for them. You can find out what's going on with their bank account and help them out in that way.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's with a power of attorney.
That's for
So
legal and financial
okay.
matters.
Okay, so what about a healthcare proxy?
Healthcare proxy, biggest way it comes in is
Mhm.
a lot of people tell me, well, I don't need that, right? Anytime my dad or my mom was in the hospital, the doctor would talk to me. What they
Mm.
don't realize is the doctor was talking to their mom or dad while they were in the room. They weren't
Mm.
necessarily seeking them out.
Okay.
So there's a difference, right? If sometimes they're courteous. Sometimes they prefer to speak to family members, right? The person gave consent, so they noted that in the chart. But if we're in a situation where the no consent can be verbally given,
Mhm.
then we're kind of stuck. And another big place where it comes in is 911. If you call 911, they're going to take your loved one to the nearest hospital. That's not always the best hospital.
Okay.
That's not always the hospital that knows them. That's not always the hospital where their doctors are affiliated. So sometimes you want to move them. If they're stable and they're good enough and everything is fine, you say, well, we're going to get care at her regular hospital. If you're not a healthcare proxy, you're not moving that individual. They're staying put.
Okay, okay. So what about a living will?
A living will is a directive. It kind of helps out the healthcare proxy to know exactly what your wishes are as far as artificial nutrition is concerned, DNR requests, things like that. It kind of doesn't put everything on the person to, make those decisions because it's just not a sexy conversation, right? There's never a good time to talk about if I'm ever on a ventilator, pull the plug, no matter how much wine you bring to the party. It's just never going to be it. So some families don't have those conversations. So what happens is they put it down on paper, they put it next to their healthcare proxy, and they hope that their healthcare proxy reads it and carries out their wishes for them.
Okay, so that's good because sometimes those hard conversations, it's uncomfortable. You don't want to have them. So if you have a living will for yourself, when they read it, they'll know exactly what you
What you
want. So
want.
that helps them out.
I try to make the meeting that I have with the family members, always as informative as possible. So I like to broach those difficult conversations and I just rip the band-aid off and I'm like, so if this were to happen, how do you feel if that were to happen? And I kind of make notes about it. I write it down and I make sure everybody in the room knows it. It's usually not a shocker, but for some people, they're like, really? I would have never thought you wanted that.
Right, exactly. Okay.
And religion is big too. Like a lot of people's last wishes will go in accordance with the religion that they believe. So there's Catholics, there's Jehovah's Witness, they don't get blood transfusions.
Right.
And there's other factors that weigh in when people are making these decisions for themselves.
Right. So it's better for them to have a
Just
living
know
will
it.
to let people know that this is what I want. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I heard something, a couple, they were trying to plan for estate and they are married,
Hmm.
but they were advised to protect your assets, they should get divorced. Do you know what that is?
I mean, that's something that happens, and I don't really understand that advice. I've heard that advice.
You have heard it.
I have
Okay.
heard it. Sometimes I think what happens is people assume that if somebody gets sick, that their assets or their spouse's assets are automatically going to come to play. That's not necessarily true. And just by getting into divorce, that kind of changes everything. And I'll tell you why. If you do no planning and you're married with no kids, your spouse is your next of kin.
Right.
If you get a divorce and you have no kids, your mother is your next of kin.
Mm.
So do you want your mother, and then if your mother's not there, your mother and father are treated the same.
Right.
And then if your mother and father aren't around, then your siblings, do you have estranged siblings? Like, do you want them in the business with your wife, who was your wife, who's not your wife because you got divorced just because? That's not saving assets for anybody. A lot of times what people don't understand is if one spouse gets sick, we can transfer assets to a healthy spouse and we can preserve them. And up to $1 million, there's really no suing a spouse for any contribution.
Okay.
So you can transfer up to $1 million to a healthy spouse and you won't be sued for contribution. The house usually is off limits because if a healthy spouse lives there, Medicaid can't put a lien on a house that a spouse lives in. So there's a lot of rules where we can use the spouse and it's to our benefit, not to our detriment. So I don't really always understand the whole get a divorce.
That may not be the first thing you do.
That's usually my last thing. I mean, get a divorce if you need one, but don't get it for your assets.
Right.
We can do other things.
Okay. So let's talk about Medicaid, because a lot of people, they feel like if they have something, if they have, a certain amount of money, if they have a house, they can't get Medicaid. Can you just kind of clear some of that up?
Medicaid is very fact specific. You and somebody else can have literally the same assets except for maybe one retirement account, and that one of you will qualify, the other one won't. Right? It's literally so dependent on what is there, what you have, and what your potential income earnings are when you are retired. Right? So I'm hesitant always to give general information because nothing about it is general. What I do say very generally is before you think about paying any type of home care bill, nursing home bill, you should definitely always reach out to an estate planning attorney and have that conversation, because you don't know how many people I see after they've spent mom's whole retirement account, which didn't even have to be touched because it was a protected asset, and they've sold a house that they didn't have to sell because it was also a protected asset. You're allowed to have a home. They could just put a lien on it when you pass. Again, if we don't have all the other exemptions that we work with, right? And it's just the things that people do because they get desperate and they just think I have to pay this bill is astronomically insane when I see it. And there's nothing I can do at that point to help you. But there's always something I can do before you get sick. And even when you're in the midst of the sickness, to try to find you a way out. I think that is my biggest attribute. And I hope that's every attorney's biggest attribute is we problem solve, right? Our hope is not to see a problem and go, shucks, that's a real big problem, right? My goal is to always fix the problem. And if there is no fix, then I'm going to tell you honestly, like, there's no fix, but this is what we have to do, right, to get through it. But nobody should be going at it alone because the system is so tricky, so convoluted. And again, your situation is never going to be the same as somebody else's situation because Medicaid looks at assets, income, and health factors. What two people have the same assets, income, and health factors? That's very hard to match up. So when it comes to Medicaid, it's like, I always like to say something can always be done. It's just a matter of how much can be done.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. That's interesting because a lot of people feel like, okay, we have to get rid of everything, before we apply. We can't let them know, whatever.
Yeah.
But let's talk about something, the 5-year look back. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So if we're talking about the 5-year look back period, we're only talking about nursing home Medicaid. Now, there's a misconception with the trust where people will say to me, well, doesn't it take 5 years to take effect? No, the trust takes effect the minute you sign it and fund it, right? The assets go into it. That's that. It's already effective. If something happens to you, you pass away, those assets will avoid probate automatically. Now, in order for the trust to be outside of the look back period for nursing home Medicaid, yes, we have to wait out 5 years, because Medicaid tells us that if you transfer assets out of your name within 5 years, you are forced to have a penalty for that transfer if you want to qualify for any type of nursing home care. But if any transfers were made outside of that 5 years, they can't penalize you for them, and it can't count against your eligibility for Medicaid. And those assets that you transferred also won't count against you for eligibility.
Okay. So when you say penalize, explain what penalize.
So, for example, let's say you transfer $100,000 into a trust and then you need Medicaid, right? I would probably tell you, listen, don't go to Medicaid right now. Spend down the $100,000, put it back in your name, and just private pay until you don't have anything, and then show them that it was spent. But some people, they say, I'm going to go for it anyway, right? Or they get the wrong advice. So then Medicaid will charge them a certain fee based on that transfer that they made. And it's calculated by the numbers, and they'll say, okay, this is what you owe us because of those transfers that you made within this look back period.
Okay, I see. So
they don't give you like a straight denial. Sometimes they give you a penalty.
Okay, so that's part of the penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is it that you see that is common that people don't know or not aware of, but that you think it should be common knowledge, but people don't know?
So many things. It's such a jam-packed question. Number one, every will, while necessary, will go through probate. What does that mean? It will end up in court. If you leave assets by will alone, they will end up in court.
Okay.
Automatically. Now, if you don't do a will, your assets will also pass by court. So it's not like a catch-22. It's just a matter of rewriting what the state already has written for you. Because what people don't understand is they already have a will. You're born, you have family, there's already laws in place to say who's entitled to ask for your assets.
Okay.
Right? So if you have a house and you have a husband and he's not on title, right? Because for whatever reason, some people buy their houses in their name alone, then they get married later on, and they think, well, the husband automatically inherits, right? He'll be fine. No, he doesn't. He gets $50,000 plus half, and your kids get half. Now, sometimes that could work if those are his kids, but sometimes if you have kids from a separate marriage, something like that, it doesn't always work out because they say, well, I want my money.
Right.
Your husband's in his 90s going, well, I thought this was my house, and everybody's trying to rally up and go, how do we do this? And it makes for a very awkward time and uncomfortable conversations. Everybody already has a will. So when I tell people you need a will, it's because you're rewriting the plan that has already been put in place for you. You're either rewriting it to say everything to my husband first, or however you want to do it, split with your kids, putting provisions in. If your kids have special needs, for example, you want to leave things in a special needs trust for them. If they have a spending problem, maybe you want to do a spendthrift trust for them. There's a lot of options, provisions, and contingencies that can be put in when you write it down, as opposed to what, the law kind of states, blanket, right? Now, the will is the plan. I tell everybody, you need a plan, right? You can't just wake up one day and say, all right, all my assets are going here, and I didn't, put anything down on paper. Everybody needs a plan, and that's what the will is. But it's just that. The execution comes in the trust, in the retitling of assets, in the next phase. Okay. And for whatever reason, people buy and do and save, and they're really good at that part, but they just drop the ball when it comes to planning for these assets. And if we planned, we'd be a much more organized group, and I think generational wealth would flourish because we don't need to pay capital gains, right? Estate taxes aren't a thing unless you're worth over $7 million in New York, right? Almost $15 million now for federal. Wow. Like, the numbers just have gone up astronomically. So there's just so many things.
Okay.
People think estate planning is really only for the rich. It's not. I say estate planning is for anybody who's concerned with succession planning, which should be all of us. If you have anything to leave, you should be concerned about where it's going, right? Long-term care planning. If you're aging, your biggest expense is always going to be medical, right? And tax planning, if it applies. Those are three things that estate planning covers, and it applies to almost everybody.
You're right. People think that estate planning is for people who have lots and lots of money and
Hmm.
assets, and it's for everyone.
It's for
So,
everyone.
yeah. Well, thank you for this information. I really appreciate it, Nicole. Is there anything else that you would like to say and like the audience to know?
I mean, I'd always want the audience to know that I'm here for anybody who comes through you, and they can find me at 646-620-4281.
Okay. Where's your office?
I have offices in Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan, and Long Island.
Oh, okay, okay. So you're all in the New York
Yeah.
area. Okay, okay. Well, thank you so much for giving us all this information. It's definitely much needed. I tend to do this because caregiving, when you become a caregiver, you don't have any idea how the finances are with your parents or whatever, and
Hmm.
you don't even realize that because you're doing it, from your heart. You think you're going to take care of them, and you don't realize that financial stuff is and financial manners are a big part of it. It's a big part, and it's very important, and if you don't know, then it can cause a lot of complications. So yeah, so that's why I like to get this information out so people can plan before something happens. So if you're seniors and you're out there and you're getting older, talk to your family. It's better for you to tell
Hmm.
them what you want, so this way they'll be more prepared and you'll have a better quality of life. Well, thank you again, Nicole. I
It was a
appreciate you
pleasure
coming.
being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Remember to follow Autumn is Here on all social media platforms.